Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, for anyone that might have forgotten who I am, my name is Steven Railston. I've not been on the podcast for a few weeks because my colleagues have been out in the United States of America on tour and they've come back and I've been absent, haven't I, Samuel? I've not been on the podcast today. I'm just joined by Samuel Luckhurst, obviously.
You weren't in person. You weren't in person in the office the other day either. I know we have been feeling bereft. We really have, but it's great to have you back on, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I saw the Manchester Evening News were discussing or publishing an article, about Morrison closures, Samuel, and my heart jumped for a moment because I thought the Morrison's next to our office was going to close, and that would be a disaster, wouldn't it, if that happened?
Yeah, there'd be literally nowhere to go for anything to eat. I don't think it'd be quite the drive away. But yes, hopefully a few more in person podcasts this season. It was certainly better for myself and Ty doing that. Maybe not. We weren't framed quite right in America. We looked like those Russian assassins in Salisbury a couple of years ago when they were saying that they were just going there to see the cathedral or whatever it was. So we didn't look great there. We looked a hell of a lot better the other day in the studio.
I think you could frame it anyway. You two still wouldn't look good. All the help you can get, both of you guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, Samuel, there's reasons to be cheerful on this sunny Friday afternoon in Manchester. The rain has gone away, the sun is back out, and the Premier League is back this weekend. Obviously, Manchester City play Burnley tonight, and Manchester United kick off their season on Monday night, the Monday night football fixture, of course, against Wolves at Old Trafford. Me and you are headed along to that one, so it should be a cracker. But I guess we'll start off today with a bit of transfer chat, and we'll look ahead to the game a bit later in the podcast, but there's plenty to get our teeth stuck into as usual. And the big story today in the last few days has been Harry Kane, Samuel. Will he not join Bayern Munich? And I've been reliably informed he's on that runway now. He's going in the plane to Germany and he's signing a deal at Bayern Munich. Now, I remember someone describing Erik ten Hag as being obsessed about the prospect of signing Harry Kane to you earlier in the window or ahead of it opening, in fact. Now, for me, Harry Kane seemed like the dream signing, really, Samuel. He's a guarantee of goals, isn't he? But I guess as the summer progressed at the very start, he just felt increasingly unattainable. So was it always a bit unrealistic, do you think, as the weeks and the months progressed, as far as United's interest was concerned?
I think it was in April when I did the story that they wouldn't play games with Levy, and then about a month later it was all but over for United and going for Kane. I think they were always reluctant to say we will absolutely not sign him, just on the off chance the possibility arose, but it realistically it was never going to. And Bayern Munich have probably done Tottenham a favour, and they've probably done Kane a favour as well, in that they're the only club that have come in. They've given Tottenham a lot of money for him. He gets to go to a club where his chance of success will rocket. He's almost certain to win a title with Bayern Munich. He'll have a very good chance of winning the Champions League as well, and he'll be playing the Champions League every season that he's there. But as far as United were concerned, they made quite a quick decision that they weren't going to go near him unless there was any shift from Daniel Levy, and certainly when Levy was told by the Tottenham owner Joe Lewis that he had to sell Kane or get him tied down on a new contract this summer, you did wonder there perhaps United might come into the reckoning. I think under previous stewardship they probably would have. It's been well documented that Ed Woodward, when everyone knew that Gareth Bale was going to Real Madrid, there you had Ed Woodward and David Moyes bidding for Gareth Bale, to the point that they actually United outbid Real Madrid that summer in 2013, and it was a world record deal that Bale went to Real Madrid. But Bale had no interest in going to United. He just wanted to go to Real Madrid, and that was just Levy trying to drag it out, and of course this has been dragged out with Kane. This and him getting a transfer, it was always going to be done in August at the very earliest, and you still wouldn't be surprised if it drags on a little bit further. But United were quite decisive in moving on from him and going to that next tier of options, and eventually they plumped for Rasmus Højlund, and certainly it's at the moment it doesn't look great that Kane is scoring 4 goals at the weekend for Tottenham, and Højlund might not actually play this month as he recovers from a back injury. But the comparison and the judgments will be coming pretty thick and fast over the course of the season. Unfortunately for Højlund, he will be judged against strikers who are frankly far better than him at the moment. But if he can replicate their form for United, then the whole thing about the fee and going for him over Kane, that will be rendered moot. But that United might be able to brag about that in maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, rather than any time imminently.
I mean, it'd be fantastic for Højlund to hit the ground running. The team desperately needs a goal scorer. They kind of need that to happen. But realistically, I guess at the end of the season, in his first year in England, at 20 years old, he's still very raw. I think 15 goals would probably be a good return, Samuel. It's
I agree.
A lot of money invested in him, but it's a long-term investment, isn't it? A bit like Anthony, they're paying that money for the player they think he can become instead of the player he currently is at the moment. Do you think there's going to be any more incomings then, Samuel, this summer? I mean, we've had Mason Mount, Andrew Onana, and obviously Holland, as we just that was a bad pronunciation, coming in so far. So 3 signings, and I know there's been a few names heavily linked, Amrabat, but probably the Italian media have overplayed that. The midfielder, obviously, Moroccan for Fiorentina, who's excellent in their European campaign. So does it really depend on outgoings, I guess, because there's still a lot of players that need to be shifted, namely, when you think about it, Harry Maguire, obviously West Ham are interested in him and they've lodged a bid, haven't they, and they've agreed some framework to sign him.
Yeah, it's contingent on outgoings mainly. They will try and get a centre-half if or when Maguire goes. Maguire is still a United player, and Ten Hag suggests that he'd be available for the Wolves game today. That could change come match day. It's still... That game's still more than 72 hours away, so that there could be some movement there that actually, Maguire ends up on Monday evening in London rather than in Manchester. So certainly centre half is, you look at it, they are quite short there, so it's not a surprise that they'd want to do business and get get a defender in or a defensive minded player. McTominay didn't get brought up at the press conference today, but where he's been injured, his situation, it felt like he was going, and now it feels like he's staying, but there could still be a change there, and if that is the case, then United would have to get in a midfielder. But the word from United was that when Mainu got injured, the chances of McTominay going subsided quite significantly. The goalkeeper situation is a really curious one. It's never ever felt settled all summer, really, beginning with De Gea's contract for Argo, in that you've now got Tom Heaton, who is injured unfortunately and out for a few weeks with a calf strain. Radek Vitek has been injured. He was doing some individual work while we were filing our copy at Carrington earlier, and you've got Dean Henderson. It seems like at this stage, I'd be surprised if United let Dean Henderson go, because they're otherwise leaving themselves very short. Because Masai
Samuel,
Kovar,
is it wrong for me to feel sorry for Dean Henderson at this stage? Sorry for interrupting. I'm going to start a hashtag free Dean Henderson, because I mean, he's wanted to leave for the last 2 seasons now. He thinks he's the number 1 goalkeeper, and he probably deserves the chance to kind of kick on and play regular football. He enjoyed himself at Nottingham Forest. We all saw that. He thought he was going to sign for Forest. He picked up that thigh injury, didn't he, towards the end of last season, and I do feel a bit sorry for him if he's now kept on the books, obviously, for that injury to Tom Heaton, and he's forced to play second fiddle to Onana. It's not an ideal situation for him, is it? No,
and 2 years ago he had that bout of COVID that prevented him from becoming United's number 1, and when he was fit again, Solskjaer was too soft to get rid of David De Gea and put Henderson in, so he reneged on his pledge that he was going to install Henderson as number 1. Unfortunately for him, this year, that thigh injury that he sustained in January was worse than they thought at the time, so then he had surgery in May. That sidelined him for 3 months, as I think I wrote at the time, and Forest have been a little bit tentative about buying him outright, buying him quickly. I think if he didn't have that thigh injury last season, he'd probably be a Forest player by now. So it's not a great situation for him. There's a Euros next summer as well. He'd have thought, get a move, play regularly, hopefully get back into the England squad despite the pretty fierce competition there with Pope, Ramsdale and Pickford. But the way it's going, it wouldn't be a surprise if he's marooned at United for another season, which is not ideal for him. It's not ideal for United either, because they were hoping to bank a good fee for him, and they were certainly discussing the possibility of loaning him to Forest with an obligation to buy, but setting the appearance mark at quite a low number so that they would get that money in January. So the money they bank this summer and in the winter, that would help them be in compliance with the profitability and sustainability rules. And Henderson is a sellable asset, but the way it's going, because of Heaton's own misfortune, the misfortune for Henderson could be that he actually ends up staying at United. United do want to sign another goalkeeper. Obviously, Zion Suzuki rejected them earlier this month to join STVV in Belgium because he was going to get more regular playing time there. I wouldn't be surprised if they went down the journeyman style route towards the end of the window. Dubravka came in on deadline day last year, and there are probably a dozen goalkeepers in the Premier League and the Championship, maybe more, that you would look at their profile and you'd think, yeah, I could absolutely see United just bringing him in as backup, someone who's happy to be a number 3, and that happening towards the end of the window. I don't think there's any immediate rush there, but I suppose given the injuries, and it's not just Heaton who's injured, Vitek has also got an injury. It's that they're pretty light in goal at the moment, and to the point that Henderson might have to be parachuted into the matchday squad on Monday, and this is someone who has not played since January, so it's not ideal, however way you look at it.
It's a bit of a mess with the goalkeepers at the moment. A name who's worth following, Samuel, I'll just point out to listeners, is Eli Harrison. 17 years old, he's coming through the academy at the moment, but he's really, really well regarded in the academy. When you talk to staff, when you go to games, he's supposed to have a bright future ahead of him. Pardon me. So if you keep an eye out for his name in the near future anyways. Samuel, you were just discussing centre-halves there, and obviously Harry Maguire is the most probably logical candidate to leave next to West Ham. The names that are getting bounded around, obviously Benjamin Pavard from Bayern Munich. He's naturally a right back, so for me, I'm not sure that would be the best signing in the world. And obviously there's interest in as well in Bayer Leverkusen's Edmund Tapsoba. So do either of those names kind of really appeal to you? And as well, I guess it's a bit of a hard sell, is it not? I mean, the allure of Manchester United will always be there, and they're going to pay good wages, and it's a good project to join. But you've got Alessandro Martinez there and Rafael Varane, who are the established first choice centre halves. And I guess if you're signing for the club at the moment, you know you're going to slot in as third choice in that pecking order, aren't you? And obviously Lindelof's still there; he's going to still be fighting for his place as well.
Yeah, what I was told with Tapsoba was that he would want assurances that he'd be going in as a starter, and I don't think any centre half who joins United would be given that guarantee. I suppose if you want to look at it a bit more optimistically from the player's perspective, or a centre half with aspirations of joining United's perspective, Varane is not the most durable of defenders. I think, however way you look at it, with an eye on next summer, I think we're all looking at that as a time where United would absolutely need to sign a high level, high quality centre back. Maybe that will happen sooner if Maguire does go, because they will need a replacement. But whoever comes in, it's not going to be someone that they see as, he's just a filler. I think it will certainly be someone that they see as having potential to be a starter. And I suppose using the word potential with a 24-year-old like Tapsoba or Benjamin Pavard, who's very well known and won the World Cup with France, is a little bit premature. But in Pavard's case, that would be somewhat odd. I don't think he's necessarily the right profile of centre back to come in. I know he obviously has played at right back a lot. I think Bayern Munich originally signed him as a right back, but he can play at centre half as well. I think Bayern Munich's a good fit for him, and that's the reason why he's been there for 5 years. They signed him after the World Cup as well. I think they signed him from Stuttgart. But coming to the Premier League, I question the physicality, and also he would probably intend to start. And if there's a place for him to start in the defence, you'd probably say it should be at right back, because there's a credible argument that he's a better right back than any of the two that United have at the moment. But it's a centre back you want as cover, and again, if you were to cut corners, you could possibly say, well, Luke Shaw's a centre back. Those are your four centre backs: Varane, Martinez, Lindelof, and Shaw. But it doesn't work that way. They want
you wouldn't want to
four
rely
specialists
on Malacia
there.
either, would you, surely, in the biggest games?
No. And Malacia is also injured at the moment, and he's been injured for quite some time. He came back in pre-season with a problem, Ten Hag said today, and he's still. Ten Hag wasn't particularly clear with his injury bulletin, but he's just that he was still a few weeks off. So you're looking at post September internationals for him to get a look in at United. So that's a 2-month absence, because he didn't get a kick on across the pre-season games because he came back injured. So that, however way you look at it, at centre half they will be light if Maguire goes, and they absolutely need a replacement to come in. I do think they will get a replacement to come in, because they can't take the risk of having such a shallow pool of centre backs, and especially when you factor in Varane's general brittleness.
I tell you what, man, do you remember Pavard's goal at the 2018 World Cup? I think it was against Argentina.
Yeah, against Argentina. Yeah, round of 16.
It was like me and five-a-side, wasn't it? It was beautiful.
I don't think he was 35 yards out, but it was the goal of the tournament. There was that beautiful camera angle behind it where you saw, because obviously it curved outside and then it went back in the post. It was mind-bending stuff. It was like something from the Matrix. It was a truly great goal.
I was in Berlin watching that, actually. I was travelling in Berlin that day, and I was watching in a hostel, and there was some very happy French fans, I believe. Anyways, we'll leave that there for part one, and we'll be back in a moment for part two. Now, Samuel, I looked at Ten Hag's spend actually for a piece. I think it was last week, and I posted out on social media, obviously, and I racked up the money he'd spent on his 8 signings so far across the 2 summers. Obviously, he wasn't really backed in January, was he? Just getting Wild Weghorst in, and obviously the goalkeeper on loan as well, Jack Butland. But if you total it all up, without add-ons, I may add, it's 364 million that he's spent so far at the club. Now, for me, Samuel, I said on Twitter, and I got some people disagreeing with this, but I think that's objectively the manager being backed, isn't it? It's a lot of money.
Yeah. One, Twitter, who cares what people on Twitter think by and large, but also I don't know why anyone would dispute that. He has undeniably been backed. I think they've possibly spent more this summer than maybe we anticipated. The noises that Merton made on the fans forum last year were, it was almost as if it was going to be reined in, but in the end they've invested, I think it's £179 million in the 3 signings they've made, and if they get a centre back in as well, that's probably going to take them over £200 million in what they've committed to 4 players at the very least. He has had enviable backing. I don't see why. I don't see why fans would query that. I think it's pretty factual.
I thought exactly. I thought you'd agree with that as well. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money. I guess the problem is when you look at the season and the expectations. We're going to come on to that a bit later. Actually, what our hopes are, anyways, or where we think United or what they're going to do this season. But you look at the teams around United at the moment, Manchester City, the squad depth they have, they've almost got 2 starting lineups, don't they? Arsenal have spent a lot of money as well in the last 2 seasons. But, I mean, that's a big outlay. But for me, Samuel, it still feels like United are probably hoping for third at best at the moment. It kind of feels like the 1 or 2 top signings, I guess, away from bridging that gap to the top of the league. And Harry Kane probably was that player for me, that if they did bring Harry Kane in, they maybe could close on a Manchester City and actually mount a credible title charge.
That's certainly my reservation going into the season. They were always going to spend big on a striker, and everyone knew they needed a dependable goal scorer. And you can't say that they've got that. You look at Rasmus Højlund's scoring record at Copenhagen, Sturm Graz, Atalanta. you cannot truthfully say he is a proven goal scorer. He might be for United. Maybe Ten Hag is the coach to tap into that potential and make him into, transform him into one of the elite strikers on the planet. But I always felt United needed that guarantee of goals, and they haven't got that, and that is going to be a problem. And Ten Hag has talked about other options in the meantime whilst Højlund's injured. It's not an ideal set of circumstances. Kane was, when United say that they got their first choice target in Højlund, they're half correct. He was their first choice attainable target they deemed, but the one Ten Hag would have loved to have had was Kane. And if you put Kane in that team, immediately you'd be talking about them as potential title challengers. I think there's a very good chance they will remain in the top four this season. Maybe this is a season of, as far as top four goes, of consolidation. Even if they drop down to fourth and end the season in fourth, it's not a major disaster, but the aim has got to be to have a better season than last season, and if they finish in the top four and they win the FA Cup, that would still be considered a success, I think. But there, of course, does have to come a point where so much money has been invested in the team and the squad, and let's face it, the team rebuild is over and done with now, for now anyway. The squad rebuild is still ongoing, but that team, you've got Ten Hag's signing is in goal. There's a centre back who's his signing. The two midfielders are his signings. A winger is his signing. When Højlund's fit, that's his signing. Rashford, Shaw, they signed new contracts on Ten Hag's watch. Fernandes was made the captain. Varane's a World Cup winner and was a great player for Real Madrid, so why the hell wouldn't you want him in your team? And I suppose at right back, if you were to put Dalot there, he's another player who signed a new contract under Ten Hag. So it's a team that he has assembled in his image that he has to be content with now, at the very least, when they're all available and fit. And it will be interesting to see how often that 11 is actually selected this season, because it never does quite pan out the way that we put it down on paper in pre-season. But I certainly, as far as a title challenge goes, United aren't even really, Ten Hag isn't really talking up the possibility of that. He's using phrases like raise the bar, and if they were to finish second this season behind City, that's not necessarily a bad season. That would be a progressive season, given that they finished third last season. But as much as people say about the spending of the other clubs and how they've strengthened, Liverpool squad, it's still not in this state that Jurgen Klopp would be happy with, I wouldn't imagine. You've got the Caicedo drama going on there now. I was told this morning that Chelsea was still confident of signing him, which is pretty remarkable when Liverpool have just had a £110 million bid accepted, and there are noises that Brighton are just absolutely refusing to sell him to Chelsea. Arsenal have, Declan Rice is an excellent signing. They have strengthened. I think they have got a better squad than they had last season, and their business is not necessarily done. City have lost some key players, but they've still got probably the best core squad in the league. I don't think anybody could really dispute that in terms of their first 11, their second 11. They've plugged the gaps, and they've signed an absolutely excellent centre back in Guardiola as well, I believe his name is pronounced. So the competition is still fierce, but it's not. I don't think it's as daunting as it maybe was at the start of last season, when City and Liverpool were absolutely the best in class. Arsenal had invested a hell of a lot of money. Tottenham had qualified for the Champions League, and Chelsea had as well. They obviously win the Champions League last season. So I think that's the way United have to look at it. They are a much more formidable team at the start of this season than they were at the start of last season, and I don't think the competition with the other 5 or 6 clubs is as daunting. Newcastle have obviously muscled their way in and have made a couple of good signings, but still I think it would take a lot for them to be able to consolidate top 4 this season. I know obviously they've got grand plans to have tangible success, and maybe that will come in time, but you look at their squad and you wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the top 4 squads, and they had a terrific season to finish their last season. So that's the way United have to look at it. I at this stage, I mean, we get asked to do predictions, of course, and it's always tricky at this point because you obviously the season's about to start, so you ask for your prediction, but also the transfer window's open for 3 more weeks, and United's squad could still look quite different. It could actually be stronger, and it might give punters like us more confidence that they'll finish higher in the table. But I'd certainly probably have them down to finish 3rd or 4th the way it's going at the moment. I certainly don't think that they'll, as a prediction, I don't think they'll be falling out of the top 4 the way it's going. Tottenham haven't sufficiently strengthened, and they're about to lose their talisman by the looks of things.
And who did United sign after the first few weeks of the season last year, Samuel? A certain man called Casemiro. Casemiro wasn't a bad signing, was he? In the end,
in terms of the point you're making, absolutely. That definitely put different complexion on United last season as well. Given that we were all saying, "What the hell are they doing? They've not got a midfield still." And then they brought in a proper midfielder, and I think without him last season, I certainly don't think they'd have finished 3rd.
Well, we could all see it, couldn't we? And I guess in a bit of a warped way, it was kind of good that Brentford game happened because it made Ten Hag sit up and go, hang on a minute, I'm going to need someone else in here. I can't kind of play in that Ajax way of the control in midfield and the way he was trying to go about it anyways. I've been quite impressed though, Samuel, with the business, not just obviously the incomings, but the outgoings as well. And I think it's going a bit simple at the moment. It's all going a bit too good and straightforward. United are signing players that they want, and they seem to be getting rid of players that they don't want. And finally, the deadwood is being shifted, isn't it? I mean, there's still a long way to go, but Twanzebe, he left on the expiry of his deal. Obviously, Phil Jones as well, around 2 months ago now. But there's some names that are leaving. Fred's, there's interest from Turkey. He's expected to leave. We've been talking about Dean Henderson, obviously. Even to the depths of Kovar, who you talked about, looking to get €9 million for him from Bayer Leverkusen. So the club are operating quite well on at the moment in the transfer market. And I guess does John Murtagh have to take some credit for that, because he's made a bit of a difference, hasn't he, over the last few years?
The way it's going, they're on course to have, at the very least, a satisfying transfer window, in that whatever fans may think of the identity of the signings they've made, they are players that Ten Hag wanted. I mean, Mason Mount, you look at the 4 biggest deals in Europe this summer of Kane, Bellingham, Rice and Caicedo, if that's to happen as well. 3 of them are midfielders. I'd have either of them over Mason Mount. I know they different roles, etc., but objectively, I just think those 3 are better midfielders than Mason Mount. But I'm also not the United manager, and I don't have this worldview of how United play or how they need to play. And I think Mount, from Ten Hag's perspective, he is suited to what he needs. So that's the difference in terms of looking at it from one's own opinion and looking at it from the manager's perspective as well. And Arne, I think everybody would agree they've got an upgrade in goal there in terms of a complete goalkeeper. He might not necessarily pull off the spectacular as De Gea still was able to do last season, but he comes off his line, he pings passes effortlessly, he underpins attacks, and United needed that because the inability to do that last season, it was preyed on by certain clubs, most recently in the FA Cup final by City, where United just really struggled to lay a glove on them because they couldn't carry the ball up the pitch, and they didn't have the adequate ball players in the team to do that. And as far as the outgoings go, there will be more of them. The noise is sounding quite promising on Fred going, Donny van der Beek, because there have been discussions with Real Sociedad about him leaving permanently, which absolutely needs to happen. So if Fred goes, if Van der Beek goes, if Maguire goes, Bailly as well is another one who, it's easy to forget him, but he is still lingering. But there's a pretty decent chance that all 4 of them will no longer be United players when the transfer window closes. And we said, long before the window opened, that there had to be arguably a greater emphasis on outgoings and incomings this summer at United, and that's the way it seems to be panning out now that they've got the 3 main targets in Mount, Onana and Højlund. And that has to be viewed as part of the success of the transfer window, the players they get rid of, and the more players they get rid of, the sooner this squad rebuild can be completed. And Ten Hag may say, well, it's never completed, you're always looking to improve, and I get that, but there are still relics from his permanent predecessor there that they could well do with being shot of.
Do you think after not being included on the pre-season tour and not being given a provisional squad number that Eric Bailly's finally got the message that he's not wanted? Do you think it's been clear enough?
It was suggested that he'd left Carrington even, hadn't he? Like that he's cleared out his locker. Some Instagram post. I didn't see the post, but somebody relayed it to me. So he's not the first. He's not the first player to have suffered that embarrassment of having their squad number revoked in pre-season. But those players in recent years, I think it was like James Wilson, Tyler Blackett. They're pretty small fry. The most infamous example was Victor Valdez in 2015. That spiraled very, very quickly. It's pretty crazy to think that was 8 years ago. But he didn't endear himself to Louis van Gaal during a training session, and before he knew it, he didn't have a squad number, he didn't have a place in the squad, and he was transfer listed.
If you look at Victor Valdez's Wikipedia, it always makes us laugh. It's Barcelona, Manchester United, and then Middlesbrough just finds itself there somewhere on the page, which is always interesting.
Standard Liège as well, I think he was at, wasn't he?
Yeah, good shout. Bit of a downgrade towards the end. Anyways, we'll wrap that up for part 2. We'll be back in a moment for part 3. Samuel, we obviously do have an actual real-life football game, a Premier League game, after so many months of a lack of action on Monday night. As mentioned, Manchester United taking on Wolves, who are, fair to say, probably in disarray at the moment, losing Lopetegui, bit of a mess really. He agreed that he'll leave the club, and he's been replaced by Gary O'Neill, who did a great job at Bournemouth, keeping them up, really excelled, to be fair, to keep them in the Premier League. But I think he's got a big challenge ahead of him at Molineux anyways this season. I think that they're a bit of a mess. So in terms of as how far, what we're expecting for the game, really, I think it's going to be a straightforward contest. There's probably no point in talking about that. But regarding the starting lineup, I think there's a few positions that have probably got a bit of uncertainty around them. I'd say right back and left wing, those positions are probably up for grabs. We saw a battle, didn't we, with Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Diego Dalot develop in the second half of last season, despite Dalot starting the campaign in glittering form. So if you had to pick between those two, Samuel, obviously on the open day I've not saw your panel yet, so a bit of a spoiler for me. Who would you lean towards at the moment, really? Because for me, it would be Wan-Bissaka. I think Dalot's got to earn that place. He ended the season, didn't he, as the first choice right back. So really, I don't see any reason to change that now for the opening day.
I certainly see your logic, but with, again, if you're looking at it through the manager's eyes, Dalot is the right back who they've invested in. They've given a new contract to. I think he's the more rounded right back. It's not great that he's not played well in 6 or 7 months. I mean, he's not had a very good calendar year. He's as I've said before, he's still not quite recovered from that injury he got on international duty with Portugal at the World Cup, and Wan-Bissaka's actually had a pretty good 2023, but I wasn't particularly convinced by him in pre-season. And it's easy to forget, Wan-Bissaka's technically into the last year of his contract. There's the +1 option that will inevitably be triggered, but the way I see it is that United should be looking. I mean, they're looking at Jeremy Frimpong already this year, but certainly looking ahead to next year, I would say that they absolutely need a new right back, and a right back who's not just better than Wan-Bissaka but better than Dalot. And at that point, you think, well, they should be selling Wan-Bissaka, and that's not to say that he's got to be treated as a lost cause for this season or almost a nuisance. You've got to make the most of him because he's there. But he's 4 years in at United, which is actually not as long as Dalot. Dalot joined in 2018. Wan-Bissaka came a year later. But with Wan-Bissaka, what you see is what you get. I don't think that he's ever going to change there. With Dalot, I think he has got the skill set at both ends that makes him a more appealing right back to have in your team when he's at his optimum. And he's got to get back to that level, and he hasn't. He's taking his time. He's taken far too long. He made a mistake for Lonz's goal last week with a very careless pass, but when you look at the game against Dortmund in Las Vegas, Dallow's goal in the first half, and then and Wan-Bissaka's field goal in the second half at the stadium which is hosting the Super Bowl next year. Wan-Bissaka is not he's not an attacking right back, and he's 25 years old, and he's not going to change. He's made progress, but he's not. He's made progress. He gets up the field. He has a good understanding with Anthony, which is, an unlikely alliance. And credit to him, he's certainly revived his United career, because it did look like he was done about a year ago. But he is a player that they were trying to get rid of this time last year, and I don't think what he's done this year is, it's good. But as Ten Hag says, good is not always good enough, and I don't think he's a good enough right back for United for the long term.
I completely agree. I'm on the same page long term, and ironically, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said I think maybe they will need a better right back than Dalot as well, and that's where my kind of argument comes from, I guess. For all Dalot has improved, and I think he's made tremendous progress. He's definitely the early form at the start of last season. He was among the best right backs, or maybe even the best right back in the league, to be fair, for the first 3 months. But I've always had doubts about his defensive side of his game. When he's up against a genuinely very good at maybe elite winger, he tends to struggle, and I'm just not convinced. I mean, you've said Wan-Bissaka isn't an attacking fullback. Is Dalot a defensive fullback? Is he really capable in those one-on-one situations and in an aerial duel? So I don't know how you see that really with Dalot.
He's certainly. I mean, Wan-Bissaka's a better defensive right back. I don't think even Dallow's family members would dispute that necessarily, but they are playing against Wolves at Old Trafford, and Wolves have got to be one of the favourites for relegation. You look at Wolves' squad, United have got to go on the attack. I don't see any reason for them to play it remotely safe in an area like that. You want your fullbacks playing high up, or in this age of inverted fullbacks coming into midfield and mucking in midfield and trying to vary it up, and Wan-Bissaka is trying to adapt to that as well. We saw it on pre-season, and fair play to him. I thought he was pretty good in the Arsenal game, but unfortunately after that his performance level was pretty poor, or certainly forgettable. But really, I think that is, and this is a phrase I've used before with it as well, probably, it does feel like it's a bit of a toss of the coin at right back, because there's not a lot. The pros and the cons, they're almost equal for both, and sometimes it just depends on maybe it just depends on what side of bed Ten Hag gets up in the morning. I don't know, but there's not been a lot between them over the last year. Dalot was good in the first half of last season. Wan-Bissaka was good in the second half of last season, to the point I actually thought Wan-Bissaka overall had a better season, because he did overcome the difficulties of the first 3 or 4 months to regain his place and have a strong end to it. And he was certainly United's best player in the FA Cup final as well.
Yeah, he deserves immense praise. I think he should. A lot of character to fight back into the team. And it's worth going and look at our colleague Tyrone Marshall's interview with Wan-Bissaka. I think that was published yesterday, from the tour, where he discusses that and kind of the fight to get back into the team. This wouldn't be a conversation, Samuel, if they'd actually signed the one who got away in the summer of 2021. Do you know who I'm referring to in the right back position?
Kieran Trippier.
Correct. Ding, ding, ding. Well done.
Yeah,
obviously, that was 30 million, weren't they, from Atletico Madrid? But he would have been a fantastic addition. And at the time, mentality-wise, he would have been huge for that dressing room.
He was so keen to join United. I think the first story I did on him that summer, it was actually quadruple sourced. I had four separate sources telling me about the possibility, probability, likability of Trippier in United, but it didn't happen in the end. And again, that's not a great ringing endorsement for Wan-Bissaka. Solskjaer was trying to get an upgrade in 2 years after investing 50 million on Wan-Bissaka. So, yeah.
Left wing then, Samuel. I think that's the only other position probably worth debating. I mean, I've put.
I'd still go. I'd still go. Garnacho had a very good game against Lons, so I'd go with him and Rashford. Even though you've got Rashford up front, he's not a striker. He shouldn't be playing there very often at all. He is a stopgap, but the payoff is you get Garnacho on the left and Rashford is more experienced of playing through the middle than Sancho. Although I think Sancho's actually done quite decently in this false nine role. I think he's built some gradual momentum. It was a slow start in the Oslo game. I didn't see the Edinburgh game against Lyon. Obviously you were there at that, so you're a better judge. But I thought he did okay with his stints in the US games, and then. Over in Ireland last week, he did okay, but unfortunately for him, the chance that he got in that game, he didn't take it.
He's looked sharp. He's definitely looked sharp in those central positions, but I have my doubts as well because I think back to that Leicester game when he came off the bench. Was it 3-0 in April time at Old Trafford? When they beat Leicester, it might have been March to be fair. But anyways, Sancho came on. He played centrally. He played as an attacking midfield, and he looked excellent. And then in the bigger games and against better opposition, he was played a bit centrally again, and he just wasn't nowhere near as effective. And the experiment kind of failed, and they reverted to playing back on the wing. It's important as well, Samuel, I guess, just before the end of the podcast, the big news today about Mason Greenwood, that the club would delay the decision on his return. So could you tell us a bit about that, really, because you wrote that line today with that information, what's been fed on, and what's the latest, really, from the club?
Well, we were told, I even wrote in the summer, maybe as far back as June, that United's intention was to clarify his future before the start of the season, and figures from United reiterated that to those of us who travelled and covered the club on the pre-season tour of the United States. The word that was used from United was imminently. This week, you check in with people at the club. Is there a time frame on this? Is it coming? I think on Wednesday we were told it wouldn't be Wednesday and it wouldn't be Thursday, and that doesn't mean to say it will be Friday. Of course, Friday has come. We got a message drop this morning. There wouldn't be an announcement today, and eventually it's been confirmed that there will not be an announcement before the Wolves game. Someone I spoke to separately said that there's a chance it won't even be next week. This deadline was imposed, seems a strong word, but United did say that they wanted to, that their intention was to communicate the findings of their investigation before the start of the season, before their first game of the season. They've reneged on that, and so there's a delay now, and already it looks, it's gonna. I don't know what the feedback has been like out on among the fan base, but it's becoming quite inordinate now, and it's frustrating from our perspective because we've received information, we've relayed it to readers, to supporters, that the intention is that this announcement was going to be made before the start of the season, and that's not the case now. So it's frustrating on a number of levels. I think by the time it's announced, it will have been a 6.5 month investigation, and I know it's obviously an extremely delicate matter, but really United should have communicated the findings by now. The chief executive, Richard Arnold, is the man who will make the final decision on what happens with Mason Greenwood. It's not Joel Glazer, it's not Avram Glazer. They've delegated Richard Arnold to take that decision. So that's how things stand at the moment. Obviously, there's a group has sprung up on Twitter today. I think is it Female Fans Against Greenwood's Return. They issued a statement online, and they plan to protest at the game ahead of the game on Monday. I think it's pretty sad that these women have, they've got behind a strong cause, but when they're putting their statements out and when they're communicating, they're having to turn comments off on the platforms because of the vile abuse that they can see coming. They know they're going to get it, so they don't want to allow people to be that hateful. It's a sad state of affairs because it's a very, it's actually quite brave of them to stick their heads above the parapet and and protest against the possible judgment that United make on Greenwood. So it's something that really should have been resolved a long time ago, and it's not ideal for United that now that we're coming into the season, this decision is going to be communicated during the season. The coverage of it is going to be even more intense. It was always going to be a story that was going to get a hell of a lot of column inches, and newsrooms will be dedicating a hell of a lot of resources to covering the fallout from it, and wanting write-ups and follow-ups on it, and trying to glean as much detail as possible. But I think for everyone, it would have been a lot more preferable to have done it during the close season. And United, I suspect in time, will explain why there's been a delay to that, and why it's due to come, or when it does come, why it came at that time. And they've told us about discussing it with stakeholders and members of the women's team. Everybody knew that there was going to be a women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, and there was going to be a high chance of United women's players representing their nations there. Again, that process has got to be clarified when it does come to the point that United communicate it. But so far, it's not. To me anyway, it looks like they've lost their nerve because they imposed this deadline, and they're not going to communicate it before then.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head perfectly there. I think I'd echo those views, but you're right in the sense that it is obviously it's a colossal decision, and a lot of stakeholders as well need to be consulted on the matter. But to rumble on for 6.5 months to get to this point, to kind of expect the decision, and then for it to delay to come in, it is a bit disappointing. Obviously, we hope to have a decision sooner rather than later, and I'll be meeting a few members of that group as well, the protest group who are protesting against Greenwood's return next week. So for any listeners, look out for that piece on the MEN. I'll be doing an interview with a few of those members, so an interesting article nonetheless. Anyway, Samuel, we'll wrap that up there. Thank you very much for your time as usual.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Any plans for this weekend? Any noteworthy plans?
To try and overcome this cold, but beyond that, it will be working. I've seen Barbie in the cinemas. Okay. Believe it or not, I've seen that. I've done the Barbenheimer double bill. I would give Barbie 7 out of 10, but 4 stars. I'd give Oppenheimer 9 out of 10, but 5 stars. So my player ratings extend to film ratings as well.
Yeah, I thought Oppenheimer was excellent, to be fair. I think you like Christopher Nolan just as much as I do. His films are excellent. And Tenet, 2 years ago. That was when cinema was just coming out of COVID, but that was great to see.
Tenet was a few years ago, yeah. But no, I was 13, and this is going to make me feel very old and you feel very, very young probably. But Tesco always had the DVD shelves up, and I always liked to get a DVD on a shopping trip to Tesco, and I saw this film that was called Memento, and I thought that looks interesting. I was 13 at the time and watched it. Not really looked back as far as Christopher Nolan's work is.
That's interesting you say that, because I was discussing that film with my flatmate yesterday. He watched it and he said he had to turn it off. What would you say to that statement? Because I was going to watch it on Netflix. I've never seen it. Yeah, it's one of the Nolan films that I've never seen.
It's on I think it's on iPlayer, so it's well worth watching. But watch it on your own, concentrate, and then rewatch it as well, because you will need to rewatch it. But that's a great thing about his films. His films are rewatchable. And the Prestige, people forget to mention the Prestige, but that's
just one last thing.
That's amazing.
It was DVD, Samuel. It was actually DVDs. When was that? What's a DVD?
Yes, I know. Even the parental guidance stick. Yeah, even the parental guidance sticker on it was probably from a Land Before Time Forgot or what have you. Yeah, it was older back then, but yeah, I know it's you can't beat having something to hand anyway.
I agree. Don't you worry, I had blockbusters in my time. I'm not that young. Anyways, we'll leave it there. Thanks to the listeners as usual. Head across and check out the podcast on all the usual big audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. And we're always told to give the YouTube channel a plug these days. We're taking along nicely with the subscribers. And we've got Eric Ten Hag's press conferences uploaded on our YouTube channel as well. So have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the game on Monday. We'll be back next week. Take care.